Welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio. I am Caroline Chang, your host. The mission of Awake to Oneness Radio is to inspire the world to awaken to the universal truth of oneness. Science is now teaching us that all life is interconnected and interdependent. Spirituality and ancient wisdom has been teaching the truth of oneness for eons. So what you do to another person, you're literally doing to another aspect of yourself. And when mankind awakens to the truth of oneness, there will be peace on earth. Today's show topic is Forgiveness Made Easy with Barbara J. Hunt. Barbara is an author, a musician, and a life coach. She is amazing. We connected through email, and I invited her to be a guest. Welcome, Barbara, to Awake to Oneness Radio. Thank you,
Caroline.
So much. And Barbara is connecting with us all the way from the UK. So it's much later there. Barbara, are you still there? Because your screen is frozen.
Is it? Yeah, I am still here.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, we can still hear you. So I think we'll just keep on rolling, as they say. And sometimes that could be internet connection. So, but we see your picture and we hear you good. Okay, Barbara, please, like I said, I did get to meet you via the internet. And can you share a little bit of your journey, your spiritual awakening with our listeners who may not be familiar with you?
Yes, sure. Thanks. Well, actually, it did start quite a long time ago when I was about the age of 15. Before that, I was brought up in a Catholic household by practicing Catholics. And so I already had a religious background. And then when I was 15, somebody introduced me to the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Okay.
And that asked such deep questions that I became interested in the deeper spiritual part of life. And as I went through my 20s, I was just more and more interested. And there were a few bookshops in London where they had spiritual books like A Course in Miracles and A Return to Love and Shakti Gawain. And so that was really where my spiritual path veered away from the Catholic Church. And I started looking into other spiritual information. And then since then, I've been initiated as a Sufi, and I also have done Buddhist practitioning and also evolutionary spirituality and study with Craig Hamilton and studied with him for the last 7 years. So I think I'm a gourmet, a gourmand of all different kinds of spirituality. But I think at the heart of it is exactly what you're saying, with your show, which is that there is, the oneness that's underneath everything and the way we could be with each other. I think I'm really interested in not just in the theory, but how do we live together in a different way.
That is so beautiful. And I came from a Catholic background, but my family was never Catholic. My mom became Episcopalian, but her father was a Baptist minister. And my dad grew up Baptist. So, but my parents wanted me to get a good education, and this was in the early 60s. So they sent me and my brother to Catholic school. And so we had Catholic religion every day in school, even though we weren't Catholic. So I do definitely understand. I remember going to Mass. I remember having lots and lots of questions because the dogma that they were teaching just didn't make sense to me at 4 and 5 years old. But I was raised, my parents were very strict, especially my dad. And he said, children are to be seen and not heard. So even though I had all these questions, I couldn't ask these questions. So I would say my spiritual curiosity started as young as 4 and 5 years old, because what I was being taught just didn't resonate with my young spirit, my young soul was like, that doesn't make sense, but I couldn't question it at the time. But as I got older, I was able to discover those books, more and more books. I would say one of my first books in my 20s or early 30s was, it was by Oh goodness, I'm bad. It's the messages from the Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. That was one of the first books, but there's so many books. One my favorite book is Power of Now, and and I'm just now reading Eckhart Tolle's second book, A New Earth. So, yes,
they're wonderful.
Yes, yes.
And also, actually, I didn't put in Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God, because I loved all of those too.
Yes, and he just released the 10th in the series. Well, actually, it's 10 books, but it's book 4, Conversations with God. Book 4 was just released last year. Yes, and Neil is also. I love Neil. And actually, I came late. I had the books, Conversations with God, book 1 and book 2 on my shelf since the late 90s, but I didn't read it until like the last 4 or 5 years. So when I actually read them, but it was like, I love reading those materials now because it just reinforces the oneness, reinforces what I know in my heart to be true. And I always say to my listeners, I'm not preaching anything. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a guru. I'm not a preacher. I am sharing what resonates as true for me. And what I invite my listeners to do is to go within and live what resonates as true for them. Yes. So please, so like you said, living it, that is now, I think that's where we're at. It's like knowing the truth of oneness now, but knowing it is one thing, and knowing it from an intellectual level, our heart level is two different things, because some people know it intellectually, but knowing it from a heart level is where you actually start to live that truth. So please share what you're up to in the book, your title of your book, Forgiveness Made Easy. I love that.
Well, it's funny because I've been interested in forgiveness ever since I first did a training course. There was a training course called, at the time it was called More to Life. No, sorry, it was called the Life Training, and it became the More to Life Training. And it was created by 2 Episcopal priests, and their question was to themselves was, we preach all of this good stuff on a Sunday, but how do we get people to actually live it in the week in between?
Yes.
So they had this yes, but how? And so they were interested in doing experiential learning, so doing exactly as you described, so that you are able to practice the tenets. You know, even like the Christ's love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes.
Sounds simple, but actually it's an incredibly profound teaching, and most of us don't really practice it very well in our real lives. Yes. And so I first came across the idea of forgiveness as a practice at that training, and that was like 20 something years ago, and just watching to see how hard it was to actually live the practice, and even people who were involved in that organization, you know, the struggles that they had to live it. And so I was really curious, because to me, forgiveness is probably the most profound spiritual practice that there is, because it has such depth, along probably up there with meditation.
Yes.
But forgiveness, because it means you have to be humble, you have to be willing to question your assumptions, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the other, you have to be willing to let go of all of the resentment and the grievances, which actually the ego likes. So it's actually quite a complex thing. And what I was witnessing in my coaching practice was there were certain things that I could do with my clients that would really help them to forgive. And if they didn't do those things, their forgiveness would somehow be incomplete or not completely sincere. And so I just became really interested in what works. And I love experiential learning. I love doing process work with people. I love the journey. I've done some Brandon Bay's training in journey work. So I was synthesizing different things. What's going to work to make forgiveness really powerful and practical? And so that was really what I was trying to undo. I was trying to look at, well, what gets in the way of forgiveness? Because most people, we know it's important, we have exemplars who seem, they're able to forgive extraordinary things.
Yes.
People who, like Eva Kor, who could forgive her doctor abuser in Auschwitz. Gandhi or Martin Luther King, all the kind of the great exemplars who almost seem like they can forgive things, or even the Dalai Lama forgiving the Chinese. You just think, well, how are they able to do that? When I find it hard to stop feeling irritated by my husband who keeps leaving the toothpaste lid off, so there's a real difference in the practical application for me in my daily life, as opposed to reserving forgiveness for big trauma or accidents or like the dire experiences of life. And I think most of the exemplars we have are of extremes. And so that kind of means that a lot of people aren't necessarily noticing that they are carrying grievances, and they haven't, and that's what's in the way of having a really intimate marriage, or feeling okay about your kids, or just friendships. And so when I encountered this idea of forgiveness, and some of that teaching I put into my book too, was they had you write a list of all the people that you needed to forgive. And I just thought, well, probably everybody I've ever met, like to some degree or other. And not that I'm a massively resentful person, but just in daily life, you just think, well, the postman should do that differently, and my teacher should have done that differently, and that person should have been like that, and that person should have been like that, and that time when they did that thing, and so we build up resentment all the time. And what we tend to do is not consciously release it until sometimes it builds up, and then it all splurts out and spoils relationships. And so that's what I was interested in.
Yeah, well, this is amazing, and I do want you to share those processes. But one of the things that helped me a lot to understand, first of all, like I said, for me, everything goes back to oneness. And when we understand that we're not separate, like Jesus taught, love your neighbor as yourself, because Jesus knew your neighbor was literally yourself. So you love so when I really take oneness at its core, and then we mentioned Neil Donald Walsh. There's a children's book. I don't know if I bought it for my grandson. It's called The Little Soul in the Sun. And it's all about our soul, our spirit, before we come into this incarnation. And we're actually up there looking for people, our other souls. It's like, okay, I need you to help me wake up when I go there, because I know I'm going to be asleep. I know I'm going to forget my connection to God, connection to oneness, connection to all that is. So I need someone to help me wake up. So I need you to be mean to me. We actually, before we come into this incarnation, we actually ask those people that we feel have done the worst things to us. We literally in spirit ask them to do those things so we can remember who we are. So one of the processes I've used in the past, a few years ago, I did make that list. I made a list of people I felt that really, really helped, not little things like the postman or something like that, but big things that I felt people really, really hurt me. I wrote a list, and I actually wrote thank you cards to each of those people and in the thank you card, I just said, thank you for being you. Because knowing me, knowing that in spirit, I asked them, and they're just they're just doing exactly what I asked them to do from a spirit perspective. And it's very hard for the human mind to wrap their mind around this concept. I asked someone to be mean to me. Yes, you did. Because whatever happens to you, you have orchestrated from a spiritual level. So I did, and some of those cards I actually had addresses to actually mail off. Some of them I just wrote and didn't have contact information, but long as I wrote the card to that person, it helped to release, like you said, the resentment. Now the other aspect of that, no, we're not going to forget. We're not going to forget what was done. But when we understand from a higher spiritual perspective that we orchestrated it, and that person is not separate. So going back to the oneness, that person's not separate. We ask them to do it. We can release that resentment. So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very profound practice to be able to do that, and that is a testament to your spiritual path and what you've and how you've been with your life. And I think some of what I've done with Forgiveness Made Easy is to sort of almost like to do the preliminary steps, so that somebody would be able to make those kinds of connections, and really just starting where you are, because I think some of what gets in the way with forgiveness is that we think we know what it is, but we're not really sure. And to get really clear, so I use a definition in the book, which is from K. Bradford Brown from the Multi-Life Organization, and he says that forgiveness is the absolute refusal to hold ill will against someone for what they did or didn't do. And I really like that, because it gives us, so we're the one who's holding the ill will, and we're choosing whether or not we hold on to it or whether or not we let it go. And that seems really important, because it's not about who did what or apportioning blame, or, you know, so and for some people who may not believe the same as you do, that just being able to just say, well, whatever the reason, even if I didn't make an agreement, I can choose whether or not I hold that ill will. So it puts it back in your hands. And also because sometimes we think that forgiveness means condoning unacceptable behavior.
No.
And exactly, or that we're lying down and letting people walk all over us, or we're not really standing up for justice or saying what's right. And you can still sue people and pursue justice and not hold ill will. You don't have to hate them. You can still pursue what's right, and but you're the one who chooses whether or not you hold on to the ill will. So really what I've done in the book is I've tried to identify the 5 most common obstacles that get in the way before we can get to where you are, to be able to see the gift in what's happened.
No, I was just going to say, I'm so glad you said that, because it's not about being a doormat. It's not about speaking up for what you feel is right. Because it's always, I always say, it's also how you do it. Because you can speak up for what you know is right with a loving attitude. You can still, and without all that energy, you can do it with loving energy and not negative, not lower I don't even like to use the word negative, because everything's vibration, and you could do it with a high vibration, or you could do it with a low vibration, and it always feels so. People say to me all the time now, "Oh, you're upset," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm just speaking up for what I believe is correct." But I'm not upset at all. I have when I say upset, to me feels like a low vibration. And I have no low vibration right now. I have nothing but the utmost high vibration, but I am going to speak in love what I believe is correct.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And you can choose to do things. In fact, funnily enough, I don't know if you've seen the movie Embrace. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. I have to check it out.
It's by an Australian woman who's talking about female body image and all the effects of advertising and photoshopping, and how many young girls and women have very poor self-image, in terms of their physical appearance and who they think they are. And one of the things she tells you in the movie is about Grand Theft Auto, one of the video games, which is incredibly violent. I won't bore you with the details, but as soon as I found out how detrimental it was to women, I started a petition to the government in the UK to say that any video games that are abusive to women, they should be banned. That if we want to stop the hashtag Me Too, if we want to really change the way men treat women and the way women think of themselves, we need to legislate and do things. So I didn't hate anyone, but I took action.
Yes.
So that's sort of like what I'm trying to say is you can really take a clear stand and say, not on my watch. These things are unacceptable. Young boys playing video games that are abusive to women, they're training their brains because when you're playing a video game, that's how you train a pilot to fly a plane on a video simulation. So what are we simulating in our boys' brains? Okay. I mean, maybe there's some girls who play
that is so true. And just as a society, a global society, all the violence, I mean, I have a 7-year-old grandson, and he knows he's not able to watch cartoons with violence. Can you hear me okay? Because your picture is
Yes,
frozen.
fine.
Okay.
Have I frozen again?
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
shame.
it's okay. Long as the audio is good, because we can see, and we can see your beautiful face. So all is good. But no, I speak on this subject that you're talking about. The violence in cartoons, the violence in video games, and we wonder when we hear of a school shooting where a teenager kills another classmate, or even a teenager killing their parents. When we hear these things, we're like, oh my God! But we're breastfeeding, and I use this word. We're breastfeeding our children on violence, and like you said, to be disrespectful of women. We're breastfeeding that to our children, and we wonder why society is the way it is. So I agree with you 1,000%. Yeah. So, but please share. You were saying that in the book you have certain. You said 5 things that are kind of standing in the way of people releasing that. So can you please share that with us?
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thanks. So the first one is having a definition that works, and that is absolutely key. And it really helps to just see it as refusing to hold ill will. That's the simplest that it gets. You choose not to hold the resentment or the grievance, and so that's the first obstacle, is having a definition and actually knowing what it is that you're talking about, because then it means you're not trying to condone things that are not condonable, and it doesn't mean you're letting people walk all over you, and it doesn't mean you're being taken for granted, and it doesn't mean you have to reconcile. That's the other thing. You don't have to go back into relationship when you've forgiven somebody. It doesn't mean you stay with your abuser, or all of those things. So it's really important that is a very clear line.
Right.
And then the second obstacle that I talk about is vulnerability, because sometimes holding on to resentment feels like power. And in fact, another great quote from Brad Brown is, resentment is the power of the powerless. So sometimes what happens when we think that we can't make a choice, so when we're little or when we have no power, we think that holding on to resentment feels like somehow it's protective of us. It feels like it's power. It feels like it protects us from the pain. And if you say, for example, you have an abusive parent, if you shut down and you hold on to your grievance, it's a bit like it, like in the Course in Miracles, they call it a dark shield of grievance. It's in the way between me and you.
Right.
So you can't get me because my resentment's there. And it feels like I've got something to hold on to. And so we feel like if we don't hold on to our resentment, that we're exposing ourselves, and we're vulnerable, and we can be hurt, and that we can't protect ourselves. So I talk about that in the first part of the book, because it's really important that we understand that we're using the resentment in a particular way, because this is a bit like the other thing that's important about the book is it's undoing all of the it's a bit like the recipe that means we don't forgive. So it's looking at, it's that, and it's that, and it's that, and it's that, and it can be any of those 5 things, or a combination of those 5 things that makes it hard. And once you take each one of those out of the equation, then it's much easier. That's why it's called Forgiveness Made Easier. It's easier to forgive, and hopefully by the end of the book you'll be actually wanting to forgive, because you'll realize that there are so many downsides to thinking about it or holding on to the resentment, and that you'll actually really want to forgive. And so the vulnerability piece is really important, because we're afraid that we're going to get damaged or open ourselves up to more abuse. And you can see also how that links back to the first one, because if you think that forgiveness is saying, that's okay, then that is going to make you feel vulnerable. Whereas if you know that forgiveness is about not holding the ill will, then it's not so much of a risk.
Exactly. And when you understand that holding on to that energy only hurts you, it's not hurting that other person.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really only hurting you. And
Have you heard there's a couple of great examples of that? One of them is resentment is like setting yourself on fire and hoping the smoke will bother the other person.
I never heard that, but that's great.
I really like that one.
That is really good. Yeah, that is really good. Yeah.
So,
And also, I just wanted to share another example of, you were saying earlier, you were talking about these examples, these, really amazing examples of people who have forgiven. And I don't recall the name of this gentleman. There was a documentary on YouTube called Humans. And this one gentleman who is in prison, and he shares his story. He's in prison for killing a woman and her son. And he's talking about how the first time in his life he ever experienced love was by this lady's mom, who comes to prison and treats him like a son. I mean, so her name is Agnes, and she comes to prison and she shows this young man love, and this man killed her daughter and grandchild. And
wow.
he's in tears, just expressing how this is the first time in his life he's ever experienced true love from someone. And you would think, how could, from normal human consciousness mindset, how could this woman ever forgive this man? And now she treats him like a son and loves him and takes care of, goes to visit him and, treats him like he's her son, with love and forgiveness. So that's just an amazing example of what true forgiveness of something that you would think, how can anyone ever forgive?
Yes, exactly. And I think that those exemplars, they call us to they're inspiring. And
Yes.
they call us to, saying if it's possible to forgive this, even this, which is like the worst of the worst.
Yes.
Really, why can't you forgive your boss or
yes,
whatever it is? But again, back to the intention with the book is for it to be very practical and
yes,
for people to think about their daily practice. I mean, you might not do forgiveness daily, but what my personal practice and
right,
has been for a couple of decades is to write the name. If I'm noticing, I'm just thinking, oh no, I'm resenting so and so again.
mm-hmm.
I'll write them in the back of my book. And I tell a little story in the book about there was a woman who lived nearby, and a few other friends said, oh, I'm sure you get on really well, and you're very similar and you get on very well. But we never connected. We didn't sort of hit it off at all. And sometimes she would show up at a dance class, and I even offered her a lift one time, and she said, oh no, I prefer to travel on my own. So I thought, okay. But then the little bits of resentment, they start building up.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I realized, I just thought, actually, no, I need to do some forgiveness work on this woman. So I wrote her down in my book, and then I took the time to do my forgiveness work. And then the next day I went into a health food store, and she was there at the counter, and I was in a bit of a rush. And so I said, oh, can I just quickly get these? And she went, oh, you go first. And she was all kind of like, and I just like, I've just forgiven you, and I never have to forgive you all over again now. And but the really nice, happy ending to that story is she and I are really, really good friends now. Really good friends. And I think that's because I was willing to do my work again. And and again, back to the teaching by Jesus, when he said, how many times should I forgive my brother? He didn't go, oh, just the once, or only if it's really extreme circumstances. Right. He said 70 times 7, which I think is another way of just saying all the time.
All the time.
So
Yes.
So there are, I mean, the gifts are, like you said, like forgiveness is always for you, always, because you're the one who's now not setting yourself on fire, and the other person probably isn't bothered by the smoke because they're not even in the same room, and so it's all of the kind of angst and stress in your body is in you. And in fact, somebody sent me an article the other day. It's really great. Friends always send me articles, anything that's about forgiveness, they send it to me. So have you seen this? And one of the things I got through the other day was a quote from somebody in Time magazine saying that if you do your forgiveness work, so self-forgiveness, which we can talk about as well, that's another whole thing, and forgiveness of others, you can reduce your stress load to effectively, what they call zero, as in statistically zero. So it's so minimal that you can release all of your stress if you do your forgiveness work. Which and to do with mental, I mean, there's so many mental health issues. I don't know if it's the same in the States as it is here, but it's getting increasingly more and more obvious that our mental health is in a terrible state. And if you can
Yes.
do things about that, because you can
Yes.
do your forgiveness work. And the other thing I love about this, it's you're the one who's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
It's you deciding whether or not you choose to let go of your ill will. And
Exactly.
there's no government that's going to force you to do that, and no
Right.
religion that's going to force you to do that. But it's you getting yourself out of your own hell.
Yes.
And I
This
think
is
that's why
true.
it's so important.
This is so true, because we create all of this anxiety. Is we create it. It's not
Yeah.
being created. It all comes from within. And like you said, self-forgiveness, forgiveness starts with self. I truly believe everything starts from within. And it's really to speak of forgiving others without forgiving yourself is like putting the cart before the horse. You definitely have to work on self-forgiveness. I think it starts with self-forgiveness. Then you start to make that list and look at how you can forgive the others in your life that you're holding, because only you know when you're holding resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That story about the lady that you became friends with. That
Yeah.
is great. That is great. Yes. So I think you got up to number 3 of
Yes.
the
Well,
obstacles.
so the obstacles. So the first one is knowing what it is and isn't. The second one is vulnerability, and the third one is ego.
Mm,
So it's the place of everything that we know about ourselves and that we believe about ourselves. That in our little contracted self-image, it's
mm-hmm.
that we're afraid is going to get hurt. If you think about when people say something that annoys you, if you are seeing yourself as one being, like you're saying, you
Right.
can't be hurt by what somebody says, because it's not true just because they say it.
Right.
But if you're identified and with somebody, somebody says, "Oh, you're stupid," and you secretly believe that you're stupid, or you haven't, worked on that belief yourself, then
Right.
you might feel hurt, but that doesn't mean that it's true. And so the thing that we're protecting is the ego. And I always think of it a bit like, I don't mean it in the psychotherapeutic sense of a healthy ego. I mean it more in the Course in Miracles sense of the part of us that is it's pre-programmed with beliefs and attitudes and behaviors that are unconscious. And
Mm-hmm.
so and it does go back to attachment theory, as in, how do you relate to your parents and your primary carers, and then you're going to do things in a particular way according to how you were treated, and depending on whether or not you were treasured or whether or not you were abused. So
Right.
so there are going to be differences in everybody's ego, but it's always the egos that are in conflict.
Yes.
If you think about, that's where the resentment is between, it's not between people's hearts, it's
Right.
between who they think they are. And the ego, the best way that I know to describe it is the part of us that thinks of ourselves as better than, or less than, or
Yes.
separate from other people.
Exactly.
And so that's the part that gets involved in resentment.
Exactly.
And again, most people aren't aware that it's their ego and their self-image that's taking umbrage. When somebody says something to them, and that part of, well, how dare they? It's that that's,
yes.
and not your true nature, not your spiritual
Not
nature,
your true
or even your
self.
soul.
Yes, exactly. Like I said, I'm just now in the process of reading A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. It speaks a lot about, and for me, the ego part of us is the part that identifies exactly what you said, identifies with being separate, identifies with being the little self or the bigger self, all of that, and not our true self, because our true self is love. Unconditional love. Just like God is unconditional love, so are we. That's our true self. And when we identify with our true self, our being, then it's so easy. Like you said, we understand to let all of that resentment go. And like you said, letting go of resentment is not agreeing to be walked over. It's not saying you agree to bad behavior. It's none of that. It's just saying, I'm not going to hold ill will for anyone.
Exactly.
And myself included.
Exactly.
Yes.
Especially including myself. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And so related to the ego thing is the secret thing that we get out of holding on to resentment. And so this is the other part, which I think is really important, is that we get things out of holding on to resentment. So I already talked about the protection. So that can be sometimes what we get protection or a defense. The other thing we can get is when you're holding resentment against someone, you feel justified in behaving towards them in a particular way.
Yes.
You know, and another friend of mine who used to joke about sometimes a friend of his would be on the phone and she'd be going, "Oh yes, sweetheart, yes. What?" You know, and just like this real kind of like difference in her attitude when she was interrupted by somebody else. And
Right.
Sweet. And so the having resentment in the field between you is like sometimes you can use it as an excuse for treating somebody badly or shutting down or not being connected to them. Or you can also use it like the story of being a martyr or a victim.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that sometimes people aren't victims of other people's behavior, because some people are, but it's using the resentment as a way of holding the story in place, because you then identify, like your ego identifies as somebody who was abused or who didn't have this experience or who was let down. And then again, you're not in your true, capital S self. You're identified with your ego. And again, you're using that as an excuse to be less than who you really are. Right. And so this is almost like, this is like a secret trading that goes on. And that this is why most people aren't conscious. I think some of the problem is a lot of people don't know that they need to forgive. They don't, it's not in the consciousness. They don't think, oh, well, the reason why I need to, improve my relationship with my husband, I need to forgive him. They're just thinking, well, no, he just needs to behave the way I want him to.
Exactly.
If he just did the things I want him to do, then I would be, then I would be okay. So this is kind of like the conditional love, where if you do the things I want you to do, then I'll love you and treat you the way you, whereas we've got this secret trading of resentment, and I'll shut down on certain things because you're not doing the things that I want you to, and I'll give to other people who are. And so we can also get the moral high ground. We get a lot of, like, well, at least I'm not like him, whoever, that is, or her, so we think we're better than other people. And so again, resentment is the currency. So we're trading the whole time. And so sometimes when I work with people, one of my clients one-to-one, and I say, are you willing to forgive? This is after several parts of the process. And they say no. There's going to be two reasons. One is either they haven't said everything that they need to say to the person, because the way I work is in imaginary dialogue. But the other reason is because they're getting something out of it. They're secretly getting something out of holding on to the resentment. And actually, most often, if it's with if they've been abused as a child, it often is the protection, and they'll use the protection so they don't feel the pain or feel like they don't feel the pain. The truth is, behind the resentment, the pain's there anyway. Yes. And actually, it's like you're carrying it around. Sometimes when I do a demonstration, because I work on a retreat once every 10 weeks, 10 times a year, once a month. And I do a demo of this, and I'm carrying a big bean bag around with me to just like show it's a bit like the accumulation of the resentment over time. You often end up with a huge, big amount of resentment. Yeah. And sometimes I'll put a big sofa cushion on my clients' laps, and so they get a feel that that's what they're carrying around with them. And behind the big sofa cushion is this pain. Right. And so that's one of the reasons why they don't want to let it go. And so this secret currency, this trading of the ego, that's another thing that's been invisible. So you can just imagine. So you don't know what forgiveness means. You don't know that you're afraid of being vulnerable. You don't know that you're trading in resentment. So like, no wonder there's not much resentment going on. Right. And so the fourth. Do you want to say anything about that one? Then I can go on to the fourth. Yeah.
Oh. No, you go, keep going.
So the fourth obstacle is, or reason why it's hard, is because we don't realize how detrimental that is to us. We don't realize that this is actually a great weight. We don't realize it's in the way of our intimacy. We don't realize it's in the way of our friendships. We don't realize it's in the way of us and our creator. If we have a spiritual life, we don't. It's almost like we have no clue about the real cost of holding resentment, because it costs you in your peace of mind. When you're holding on to resentment, if you're thinking that you're actually holding on to it, and you could just choose to let it go, but I've got tension in my whole body, in my fingers, in my shoulders. I'm holding on, and although obviously physiologically you're not doesn't look like you're carrying anything, but you're carrying the tension in your body. And
yes,
and there's so many studies. I looked up lots of different
yes.
studies when I was writing my book of how brilliant it is to do to do your forgiveness work, because it releases your whole body. It lowers your cortisol levels. It reduces stress. It lowers your likelihood of having a heart attack. Yes. It's almost like it's good for everything. And I often used to think, and in fact I've written this in the book too, that if there was a magic pill that we could take, that would do all of these things, it would give you this freedom and lower your stress, and even help you lose weight. I mean, that can be a motivator for some people. If it helps you to lose weight, you can you're more likely to do it, because you're not holding on.
Right.
And if there was a magic pill, you would sell out of the magic pill. And you'd buy 2 get 1 free, and you give it to your friends and all that sort of thing. But when you say to somebody, oh, what you need to do is forgive, they're like, no, I don't. And the other really hilarious thing sometimes is when I do suggest that people are holding on to resentment, they say, oh, no, it's not resentment. They're just disappointing. And so I always think of it as like it's on a scale of, when you can recognize it as resentment, right the way down to just being a bit upset with somebody or let down, but it's still resentment by any other name.
Yes.
So,
if you're holding on to that lower vibration energy, whatever name they want to call it, towards another person, it is just, that is what is, like you said, it's causing stress. Sometimes it can cause disease. It's just, and to release it is like releasing a weight, and it's freeing, and it's transmuting. And so for everybody to understand that forgiveness of self and another is not condoning bad behavior, and it's not saying I'm just going to be a doormat. It is really all for your benefit and the other, and for your benefit, the other, and ultimately the world, because of that interconnection. So once you heal yourself, it heals the world. It's a rippling effect. It's like,
and that's the other thing that's really important, Caroline, because this is in some ways really why I wrote the book. And my dedication is to peace in every heart all around the world. And because I just saw that it's like, if I do my forgiveness work, and you do your forgiveness work, and all your listeners and viewers do their forgiveness work, and it kind of like, it's almost like we can take care of our own trash. And if we each do that, where else would you find global peace? And again, it's almost like you can't legislate for global peace. But I mean, I know lots of people will say that I'm completely unrealistic and idealist. But Bill Gates had a vision of a computer on every desk.
And now it's almost there.
And so I have a vision of forgiveness in every heart, and that's just as possible. Obviously with a little bit of help from your friends. But it's a choice. And so imagine that if we really took that on board. And everybody who's listening or watching went, okay, I'm going to make a list of all the people I need to forgive, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to work through my list, and I'm going to do it. And then you keep a rolling list, because I'm not perfect. People annoy me sometimes. And so I write them down in my book, and then I do my work. And, and in relationship, I have a beautiful son who sometimes after a while I need to do some more forgiveness work on, and it's just, that's just the nature of being a human being. But it's like, I'm going to take responsibility for that, and I'm going to do it. And the other thing I've been doing on Facebook, so I've got a Forgiveness Made Easy Facebook page, is collecting the numbers of people. So anybody who's read the book and done their forgiveness work, they're telling me, oh, I forgave 3 people, or I forgave 1 person, or whatever. And so I'm going to keep accumulating a number. So at the moment I'm at 57, which isn't very big, but it's a start.
It's a start.
I mean, the book's not been out that long. So, but it's like, why not? Why don't we just say, I'm making my contribution? And I really do think that your forgiveness is an act of amnesty for humanity. And if we are going to create global peace, this is how we do it. It's not in some other realm. It's you deciding that you're going to forgive your husband, your kids, your wife, whatever, whoever you need to forgive.
And in that list that everyone's making, I want them to put number 1 on that list as themselves.
The self. Exactly. Good.
I forgive myself. That's number 1. And then continue on with the list. But yes, number one, forgiving of self. And like you said, it starts with each of us doing our part. And we are all interconnected. So as each of us heal and forgive and grow and awaken to the truth that we're all connected, that it's going to world peace. That's the whole goal of this show, is world peace. And it comes from knowing our interconnectedness and our oneness. So this is so true. And forgiveness is a huge aspect of knowing that you are one with that other person.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the really beautiful thing is it's a choice. Yes. I mean, that's the great thing. You know, you choose what you eat, what you watch on television, what you wear, where you drive, where you work, your friends. It's just like it's another choice, and that's the real beauty of it. Is it's something that we could do. Yes. So that's always my invitation. Is is let's be the revolution of peace. Let's do it.
Yes. It wasn't Gandhi. Yes, Gandhi. Be the change.
Exactly.
Be the change you want to see in the world. And that is like a wonderful, beautiful quote. I mean, it's all right there. All of it is right there in that quote. Now, please share with our listeners how they can find you, how they can find the book. And also, you said you do almost monthly, you do a retreat. Please give that information to our listeners.
Yes, so the retreat is in the UK, but everyone's welcome. We do have people flying in from different parts of the world, and it's a detoxing retreat, but it's physical and emotional. So we do very deep emotional detox work, as well as put people through a juice fast, so they feel really healthy on every level. And that's 10 times a year. And the name of the website for that is vitaldetox.com.
Okay.
So
awesome.
and I will
have the link.
Yes. Okay. You're great. I'll give you that. Yes. And it's near Glastonbury in England, which is a very sacred site, and lots of people come just to visit the area. There's a very ancient abbey, and there's Chalicewell Gardens, which are sacred gardens with a well, which is very beautiful. So it's a beautiful place. And our strap line is 1 week to change your life, and we do have people say, "It changed my life." So, and a lot of that is because they do deep forgiveness work as part of the journey. So And my website is forgivenessmadeeasy.co.uk, and that's for the book. And my coaching website is evolutionarycoaching.co.uk, and my music website is barbarajhunt.com.
Yes, and I will have all the links at the bottom of this video, but also in the blog on my website. There will be a blog on this show, and I'll have all the links in there as well. So I'm so glad we connected, because I love just this show, doing this show. I love connecting with people who are awakened to the truth of oneness and forgiveness and love, unconditional love. You were talking about how with resentment, people just trade one for the other. Okay, I'll love you, or I'll stop resenting you if you do what I want you to do. That's conditional. That's conditional love. So I speak to people all the time about the word unconditional. What does unconditional really mean? Because that's what God is. God is unconditional love, and we are all aspects of God. So we are all aspects of unconditional love at our core. And when we understand that we can't say we only love a person, or we only like a person, or we only, can forgive a person if they do this, and this. No, unconditional is unconditional. So I pose that question to people a lot. What is unconditional to you? And for me, it's simply unconditional, no conditions. I love you unconditionally. I forgive you unconditionally.
Yes. Beautiful.
Yeah. So when is the next retreat? Because I know you say it's 10 times a year. So now we're early February, I think. I lost track of time and space.
It goes fast.
Where are we?
Yeah.
So
The next one is the end of February.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
that's coming up very soon.
Yeah,
yes.
in a couple of weeks' time. Yeah.
Yes. So this show will actually air tomorrow evening, which is, what is tomorrow? February 9th. I had to look at the calendar. Like I said, I really do. I lose track of time and space, because it's just about following passion and doing what my heart and spirit is saying to do. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know when it is, but I'm doing it.
Yeah. It's such a pleasure to talk with you, Caroline. You're such a light.
Oh, and so are you. And your music is amazing too. I found your YouTube. I found some of your songs on YouTube, and I think they're amazing. So I will have those also, those links to your music. You're such an amazing talent, author, artist, musician. I teach piano. I'm not a musician. You will not find a music video on YouTube of me playing the piano. I teach. I love to teach, and just watch the children learn. Yes. Yes. But this has been such a wonderful, wonderful time together. The time always flies.
Yes, I know.
Whenever I do this show, because I could talk to you all day, and I would love to get to the UK. And if I do, I will definitely look you up. I'm like, hey, I'm in the UK.
You'd be really welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Barbara. This has been wonderful. The name of your book, Forgiveness Made Easy. Try to find it on Amazon. Check it out. Yes. Forgiveness Made Easy. I just love that. Okay. Thank you so much, Barbara, for being my guest. I love you much. And hopefully we will get to meet in person very soon. I would love that. Love you.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.